Recreation and Arts Commission to order. Would the clerk do roll call, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Parks.
Present.
Commissioner Barraza.
Present.
Commissioner Singh.
Present.
Commissioner Cummings.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Apuda. Commissioner Vang.
Here.
Vice Chair Dolan.
Here.
And Chair McCoy.
Here. Thank you. We will now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand? Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. City Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
We have received no changes to the agenda.
Are there any other proposed changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dolan. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. Cummings.
Thank you, Commissioners Cummings. City Clerk, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza.
Yes.
Commissioner Singh.
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda. Absent. Commissioner Vang.
Yes.
Commissioner Vice Chair Dolan.
Aye.
And Chair McCoy.
Yes.
Approved.
We will now move on to the approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes, January 24th, 2022?
We have received no changes to the minutes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes, Commissioner Parks.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Is there a second?
I will second Commissioner Vang.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. City Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza.
Yes.
Commissioner Singh.
Yep.
Commissioner Cummings.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda. Absent. Commissioner Vang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Dolan.
Yes.
And Chair McCoy.
Yes,
Passes.
the item is approved. We will now move on to subcommittee reports. This item is a discussion item for the commission, and no public comments will be taken related to this item. Does the Cultural Arts Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to the commission?
Yes, just a brief, Commissioner Vang.
Go ahead, Commissioner Vang.
Oh, we did receive more application. We're hoping to meet sometime this month. And I've been in touch with Lilia. We're hoping to get some dates, and then I will, hopefully by the next meeting we meet, I will be able to provide more information. And that was more application. That's what I meant from the RFP. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does the Highest Needs Neighborhood Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission? We have no update at this time. Does the Parks Master Plan Subcommittee have an update it would like to provide to this commission?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. We will now move on to member reports and comments. As a reminder, this is a time for commission members to report anything they feel important for the public or commission to know, but it's not a time for discussion. Commissioner Barraza, do you have any reports or comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. To thank the Director of Parks, Aaron Aguirre, and his staff, also the city manager's office, Georgina White, and her staff, for their assistance in helping us expedite the processing of the necessary documentation to do a cleanup event at the 49-acre park site. We thank the South Fresno Youth Soccer League, the Roseville High School, and the Sunnyside High School students and parents for participating in this very important community event.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Parks, you're inside the chambers. Do you have any comments or reports?
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Miller, do you have any reports or comments for the commission?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cummings, do you have any reports or comments at this time for the commission?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dolan, do you have any reports or comments for this commission?
I do not. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. And last but not least, Commissioner Vang, do you have any reports for this commission?
Yes, I just want to echo with Commissioner Baza mentioned. I think it's a win for Southeast. It's been a long time. And a gratitude to the public administration team and also our council member, Luis Chavez. I think that for many residents, like Mr. Baza, a lot of our Hmong family lives in Southeast. So this is something that actually I got a whole bunch of calls and text messages. It's a good thing that is coming. And I just want to appreciate for the team's leadership, the parks leadership for ensuring this goes through, and also our mayor for supporting. This is a really big thing for I think all the Southeast residents. So thank you and appreciation to all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vang. I would just like to say congratulations to Commissioner Barraza. We met working on the 49 acres, and it's been a pleasure working with you, and congratulations for your hard work, dedication, and never giving up. Southeast is going to be very, very happy, and again, thank you. We will now move on to the city administration and park staff reports and comments. Does anyone from the administration have any reports or comments for the commission?
Yes, this is Francine Kane, and I wanted to say that we're excited for today's presentation by WRT. This presentation is a culmination of several weeks of the commission's work, and we look forward to hearing the commission's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from the park staff have any reports or comments for the commission?
Hi, Aldi Ramirez, Parks Assistant Director. I just wanted to reiterate that we have Spanish, Punjabi, and Hmong interpreters on today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to unscheduled and scheduled communication. Would any member of the public like to speak on any issue within the jurisdiction of this commission? You have 3 minutes.
If any member of the public would like to speak, now would be the time to raise your digital hand. There are no members of the public in the council chambers, and I am seeing no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
And I do see one hand raised, and I believe Michael Lynn is going to be speaking on an upcoming hearing item. Let's just follow up with that real quick. Michael Lynn, go ahead and unmute yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you are going to be speaking during the hearing to receive public input on allocations. Is that correct?
Yes, I am, but I just had another quick question regarding the new park coming in Southeast Fresno. Can we have an idea of when that's going to start construction, or is that just, right now it's been approved and the other plans will be pending?
And typically, this is the time to address council, not necessarily is a time when council is able to reply. But I will leave it at that. Christy, if you want to.
Yeah, I think that if staff has information that they can provide, they can follow up with the speaker personally. We don't want to get into too much of a discussion on something that's not agendized.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I see no more hands.
Okay, we will now move on to item number 22-277, hearing to receive public input allocations related to Measure P and the annual Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You will have up to 5 minutes for comment.
Let's see. Now is the time. Any member of the public would like to speak, please raise your digital hand and we will call on you to address the commission. And there is nobody in the council chamber, and I do believe, Michael Lynn, this was the item you would be, yes, all right. We do have one speaker, Michael Lynn Lewis, and you will have 5 minutes. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for letting me make this presentation to you. I am working right now on my iPhone, and because I have some other difficulties with my computer, so I'm just going to go off this. I think I sent you the PowerPoint presentation for this particular presentation, but basically, I can just give you an overview. In 1999, the City of Chicago commissioned 300 fiberglass life-size cows to be displayed for a public art display. They commissioned about 300 cows. They submitted, invited about all the professional artists around the area to submit their ideas about these cows, as how to decorate them, what mediums they would use. And to their surprise, about 1,500 professional artists did reply to them. These cows were decorated. They could have corporate sponsorships as well. These cows were decorated and put along Michigan Avenue, and they were called Cows on Parade. This particular art display, even though people didn't think about it and they thought about it as being kind of funny, something to put out there, but it did represent Chicago, one of Chicago's industries, which was the meatpacking industry, and that's what it's known for. At that point in time, that summer, the City of Chicago got an attraction of an additional 200 million tourists, which boosted the revenue for the city itself. It was very popular. People from around the world came. I have friends who sent me pictures, and I have those pictures with me. Also, one of the other things at the end of the exhibit, they thought they would auction off the cows and donate the proceeds to charity. They thought maybe they would get about $300,000 of revenue from that. To their surprise, again, they netted something like $3.2 million. So going forward, I am proposing that we do something similar to the Cows on Parade, but we create something that's unique to Fresno and the Central Valley. We are known for a lot of things, including our agriculture, our dairy, but we're also known for the heat.
You have 1 minute, Ms. Lewis.
Okay, I'm proposing that we erect 6-foot popsicles and ice cream cones around the city to be displayed and decorated by professional artists, and also have them displayed in areas like our parks, our entrances to our parks, and to a lot of other things. I think it would promote Fresno as a tourist attraction. I think it would promote something that we're not really known, that we're known for, but we can tell them that we are proud of it. And then I think it would increase revenue. I think it would get people out to go out and visit other areas of the cities, visit our parks, visit other
30 seconds, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. So I do appreciate you would look at my proposal. I think it was sent over to you, and I would appreciate you just considering it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. City Clerk, do we have any other public comment?
At the moment, if anyone would like to address commission on this item, please raise your digital hand. And there are no additional hands.
Thank you. We will now move on to ID number 22-278, hearing, actions pertaining to FY23 budget recommendations. Review the Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission Park prioritization strategy that will inform the FY23 budget recommendations to City Council, WRT, and Parks, and then also adopt the FY23 Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans recommendations for City Council's consideration. Would WRT please begin the presentation?
Greetings, Commission. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Peter Winch is starting to share the screen. This is a continuation of our conversations over the last couple of meetings, and where we are gearing up and zooming into some really, I think, exciting closure to how this commission shapes upcoming budget allocations for Measure P, with focus on buckets 1 and 2, which we know of as existing parks and new parks in particular. So tonight, just walking through this, we're going to be giving our usual quick overview of Measure P and the Commission's role, but moving right on into the work at hand. As you had requested last time, we're going to spend a little bit more time going over some really interesting online survey results. Really pleased to introduce Hannah Goldov from WRT. She's going to be a new voice to y'all, but has been working hard on this for many months with me and Peter and the rest of the team. So glad for her voice here. She's going to walk through those online survey results, really good background, but we've been folding that survey and those results into all of the work that we've been doing. So we'll draw a real clear connection tonight. We're going to conclude our existing park prioritization process with a motion. We're going to conclude the new park prioritization with a motion. Both of those have a little bit new mapping and again, folding in those survey results. So some good feedback there. And then lastly, we'll conclude the more recreation-based strategy, which is not park specific, but is more amenity specific and gives staff some, I think, some good latitude to develop some improvement strategies that certainly meet a lot of the priorities out there in the community. So with that, I'll move right into Measure P. And again, we cover this each time, not in a lot of detail, but we want this to be clear and as part of the record. Measure P was a tax measure passed by the citizens, residents of Fresno, and it establishes important funding for parks in these 5 buckets, the first 2 of which we've been spending the majority of our time recently looking at, which is improving and maintaining existing parks, and it's about identifying new neighborhood parks. I think in some upcoming meetings, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about buckets number 3 related to programming, buckets 4, arts and culture, and then I think some important work coming ahead related to trails, beautification, and San Joaquin River Parkway as well. So those buckets graphically look like this, where we took a pie chart and began to allocate the percentage of funding that goes into each of these buckets, and further breakdown of what that looks like in the orange triangle segments when you allocate a percentage of those for highest need neighborhoods. Gone over all of this a number of times. So with that, I wanted to reintroduce Hannah, who's going to be talking about the online survey results.
Thanks so much, John. So yeah, I'll jump right in with these online survey results. I'll remind you that these results are taken as of January 20th, although the the survey is still up and active, and the city will be gathering more data from it moving forward. So this is just a portion of the full survey. So we jumped and dug into a few key questions. Question 3, what are the top 3 items regarding existing parks in Fresno that you feel need to be addressed? Question 4, what recreation amenities and facilities are most needed in our parks? Question 6, name 3 parks you feel are most in need of upgrades. Question 8, are there any specific areas in town that you feel are not well served by parks? I'll also dive into some demographics, touching on home zip code, how many individuals live in your household, do folks have a disability in your household, and what is your age, race and ethnicity, and gender identity? These surveys were distributed widely throughout the city departments, the Parks Master Plan outreach list, Office of Neighborhood and Safety and Community Engagement Service Providers, the Mayor's Community Affairs Liaisons, council members' specific offices, various social media outlets, and lawn signs, flyers, and banners were distributed widely. On the next slide, you'll see where these lawn signs, flyers, and banners were, what parks they were distributed at throughout the park. There's quite a handful here, which has led to a great response in the survey, which is awesome. So as of 1/20/22, as I mentioned, there were 898 surveys completed. Of those, 857 answered the question, what is your age? As shown in this bar graph here, you can see that the majority of the respondents were between 25 and 44, and also quite a number of the respondents between 45 and 74, and fewer respondents were under 25 or over 75, but still a handful. The question, how many individuals live in your household? Most of the respondents said 1 to 3, but many of them also said 4 to 7, and a fewer number, only 11, said 8 to 10. When it comes to gender identity, 427 said female, 388 said male, and a smaller number said that they preferred not to answer, are non-binary or trans. And lastly, we asked if folks have someone in their house with a disability, and most people said no, but quite a number, 130, said yes, someone in their household lives with a disability. So that was an interesting finding. When it comes to race and ethnicity, we have quite a wide array here. 42% are Caucasian, 19% Hispanic or Latino, 12% Punjabi, 11% Asian, and 3% Black. A very small percentage of respondents were Indian or Indian American, Hmong, said other, said they preferred not to answer, were American Indian or Native Hawaiian. And yeah, like I said, 10% here in the green preferred not to answer. Moving to the right side of the slide, we show here the respondents by zip code, so we can see where the respondents came from across the city. In the darkest green, you can see in the north and northwest of the city where most of the respondents came from, and also the southeast. And so also, yeah, in the central Fresno, a good number of respondents between 31 and 70. And in the southwest, we see not as many responses as we would have liked to see, though you'll see in the slides following that although most of the respondents came from the north of the city, really people advocated for parks throughout and especially south of Shaw. So that was an interesting thing to see in the results. Moving to question 3, what are the top 3 items regarding existing parks in Fresno that you feel need to be addressed? Top answers here: poor condition of facilities, negative activities occurring in the park, bathrooms not maintained, need for better security, not enough trees and shade, and lack of facilities that folks like to use. So we can see here what we already know, which is that our parks, we really need to maintain the parks we have and make them more accessible. And that was reflected here in that question. Question 4, what recreational amenities and facilities are most needed in our parks? Folks here were asked to pick their top 5. And the top of the list, we see natural areas and paths, paved multi-use trails, pickleball courts, dog parks, playgrounds, community centers, picnic areas, soccer fields, community gardens, splash pads, park furniture, plazas, or farmers markets and such. So what really rose to the top were natural areas and paths, which was interesting, but there's really a wide array of amenities that folks would like to see. Question 6 is one you've already seen the results of. Name 3 parks that you feel are most in need of upgrades. Here we had 540 respondents, and those folks identified 62 parks that they felt were most in need of upgrades. And on the next slide, we'll see those parks distributed throughout the city. So these results are layered on top of the zip code analysis showing where the respondents came from in green. And the parks that are most in need of upgrades are seen in the yellow dots. And the parks that had a bigger yellow circle received more votes. So as you can see, although a lot of the respondents came from the north of the city, those yellow dots are really, and especially the big yellow dots, are distributed throughout the city. And those parks that rose to the top are Woodward Regional, Roding Regional, Inspiration Park, Oso de Oro, Orchid, Vinland, JSK, Holmes, and Sunnyside. So those were some interesting results. And on the next slide, we asked folks where in the city they would like to see a new park. And we asked them to identify this by nearest major cross street. So the nearest major cross street is identified in those red dots throughout the city. And as you can see, again, they're mostly in South Shaw, which is pretty much what we had anticipated. And when we put them all together, we created this heat map, this sort of the red, the dark red, and the light pink blobs that show where the greatest concentration of those dots were. And when folks identified one cross street multiple times, those red areas got more emphasis. So as you can see here, the central Fresno area, the Tower District, and the Blackstone corridor south of Shaw got a lot of attention, but so did the northwest Herndontown area and the southeast area east of the highway. And yeah, those are our results.
And we're welcome any questions or comments. Chair McCoy, if you wanted to answer questions, I see a hand raised by Commissioner Dolan, or we can keep rolling through. We leave that to your discretion.
No, you can take the question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. Hannah, you can answer these, or anybody with WRT. So 898 responses, and I think you said that was a great response. How does that, what are we looking at as a statistical sort of point in which we get really good data out of the number of 565,000?
Yeah, I think I could answer that, Peter. Sure. Hannah, welcome to chime in. This is not a statistically valid survey by any means. This is, I think, 898, pretty good data points from the community. And I think that how it's factoring into our weighting process was something that, you guys had set up and had given it a certain amount of weight, but it's one of many factors. And so this isn't wildly skewing any of the conclusions that we've all been working on, but it has informed that. I would also say that part of the reason we brought this back to y'all tonight was at the request and in response to a couple of good comments by commissioners last time, just to understand a little bit more about the context of who responded to the survey. And we think that, this was your and staff's direction to us, is to come back with a little bit more information about who responded, so that so that decision makers, elected officials, et cetera, can also just understand a little bit more context about where this feedback is coming from. And we think it's going to be useful as direct feedback and in all the context that we've been providing.
Yes, that's the spirit I'm asking the questions in. And how did the demographics of this survey response compare to the demographics of the city writ large? Do we have a comparison on that?
We don't currently have a comparison on that, but I think that is something that we could certainly come back and show when we go through more of the responses in the next time we present to you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess overall, sort of my concern is, and this is not a criticism by any means, it's just an observation that, everything has its bias, right? And I think an online public survey or a public survey, we need to understand the biases. And I think that's exactly what you were saying, John, regarding the responses here. I'm particularly concerned about the demographics reflecting the larger city issues. And I just want one comment, which seems to me, I don't know how important it is, because I think we have our own suite of priorities around some of these parks. But if you ask people to name 3 parks in the city of Fresno, they're going to name the one closest to them, and then they're going to name Woodward and Roding, because those are the only 3, sort of generally understood and acknowledged and recognized names. People know there's lots of other parks, and they might know a couple close to their house, but really Roding and Woodward are always going to rise to the top of that question just by sheer name recognition. I think that needs to be acknowledged, and I think we're sort of looking at the other parks much more despite these responses. Is that right, John?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a speculation, but I think it's a wise one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just one last question. I'm sorry, just some notes I jotted down. There were some questions where we asked what would you like to see at a park? Nature, walkways, paths, et cetera. Yes, thank you. Did we give any definitions to these terms so that people had a common definition when they were answering, or we just sort of let them, like a paved multi-use trail? I'm not really sure without a definition if I know what that is either, as far as
I don't think that we gave definitions for this, but in our experience, these actually are fairly user-friendly terms. We try not to inject a bunch of jargon and mislead people, but no other definitions were provided.
Okay, good. Thank you. Those are all my questions. I appreciate your response.
Any other commissioners have any questions on the presentation that we've seen so far?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Singh. Same as Commissioner Dolan, Vice Chair Dolan. I don't want to sound like controversial, but I do want us to be wary when we take in these results and see results like, Woodward at the top of the list, because as Commissioner Dolan said, it's natural for folks to just only know that by name recognition. If there's no park near you and you only go to Woodward once or twice a year, that's the park you're gonna know. Also, some of these results, we had 44 surveys taken of people under 25. I'm sure that had we, 300 kids had filled the survey out, and kids are, one of the primary users of parks. we would have had something, you know, like basketball courts or, you know, swimming pools. And while it is nice to see pickleball courts on there, as you know, that it's good to bring diverse sports, but we should acknowledge that there are abilities for certain communities to get a hold of the survey more so than others. And, you know, when we take this into account, I really hope that we, I mean, I know that it's not going to severely bias any results of, you know, where we, you know, what we do with our parks and what we fund and whatnot, but moving forward, I mean, the next, you know, park survey, I'm hoping that, you know, especially the under 25 results are exponentially increased from just 44 results to hundreds and hundreds.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Does any other commissioner have any other questions on the PowerPoint that we've seen so far? All right, I hand it back over to.
I think
See a
Councilmember
hand
Barraza.
raised.
I can't see the hand raised because the presentation is still up. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Barraza has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Councilmember, Commissioner Barraza, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I wanted to point out that for some reason I'm getting a very terrible quality of the sound. Sometimes I can hear, sometimes I cannot hear, or the source of the information. I just wanted to make that observation. But the other comment I wanted to make, I appreciate that the point has been made that the sample does not represent the universe. And so statistically, this is not really very significant. And I like the discussion that occurred towards the end of our last meeting. I believe our Chair McCoy and other commissioners pointed out that there has to be a balance of the realities of this information, because I noticed the places on the southwest, southeast, the numbers were very low in terms of the number that participated in the survey. And for some reason, I think it was pointed out that Woodward Park is well known, and sometimes when they ask what parks need to be improved, that happens to be mentioned because people happen to know about that very large regional park. So I want to just make that comment, and whoever wants to make a comment on that, I appreciate it. But before I close, I wanted to make another observation relating to the start of Sir Gibbs' presentation. And it's the two parts. One relates to the street beautification. That's one component. The other one is the allocation of funds for public safety. At some point, before we finalize the approval of the budget, I would like to be able, resources are we allocating to street beautification, and where is that going? What parts of our city? That's one piece of information that would be very useful for me. And the second one would be public safety. I've been thinking about submitting a request that we have a discussion of public safety at the parks, issues of the homeless, issues of the park. I believe they call it rangers. What's the status of that? I've been asking that question many times, and I think I'll probably have to formalize a request that it be scheduled for discussion. So I just wanted to make those observations from my standpoint.
And John, I can speak to the park ranger program that Commissioner Barraza brought up. Commissioner Barraza, we're actually going to bring an item to the commission next month regarding the park rangers. So I've been working with Chief Valderrama and his staff. What we've done to date, we've gone through and surveyed other California cities and their park ranger program to see what their criteria is, how many parks are they servicing per night, what those schedules look like. So that's the information we're putting together for this FY23, what that startup cost looks like, what those vehicles look like. So all that's being developed, and the plan will come, or at least a presentation next month to the commission.
when will we hear about the street beautification component?
Aldi, is that the meeting that we are bringing back next meeting? Is that the plan?
When you say street beautification, Commissioner Barraza, I'm not 100% sure what you're referencing.
Let me see. There is
previous slide. There it is. Bucket 5.
Oh, yeah, that will be coming back on the next meeting. Director Scott Mosier will be bringing a presentation forward at the next commission meeting related to those topics in bucket 5.
Community, like talk to folks, people.
What was that?
People ask.
You're breaking up a little bit, Commissioner Barraza.
Oh, I'm sorry. I finished.
Thank you, Commissioner Barraza. Does any other commissioners have any comments on what we just seen so far? All right, I do have one comment. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do echo Vice Chair Dolan, Commissioner Singh, and Commissioner Barraza's comments, which I do appreciate the results of the survey, but I don't feel they really represent where a lot of the disinvestment into our parks are located at, which is our south side of town, southeast, southwest, south central. You know, just like Vice Chair Dolan said, when you ask someone to name their top 3 parks, people are going to name Woodward, Rodian, and then their neighborhood park if they have one. So and then some of the amenities that were identified, you know, like Commissioner Singh said, our kids use the parks more than anybody. And, you know, to see basketball courts up there, but it wasn't scored as high, and looking at the number of kids that actually took the survey, maybe it's too late for this round, but maybe next round we can create a survey just for school-age children to be able to take, so we can get their perspectives on what they would like to see in their park, because they are our park users. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hannah, can I ask one quick question? You mentioned that the survey is still open. When does it close?
We'll have to turn to city staff for that question, I believe.
Okay. City staff?
Great question, Commissioner Dolan. So there's no hard end date to the survey. Instead, we used survey results through the end of January, about January 20th, to really inform the recommendations on the slide, and to help you all make decisions really with a component of emerging community priorities. But we didn't want to just hit into the survey because I think the information in there is still really valid. And as you are all expressing tonight, there are groups of individuals that we still need to reach. And so having it continue to be open allows us to learn from, you know, some of the stuff that you all are saying tonight, as well as, you know, allow you all the opportunity to go back into your communities and continue outreach. And we're going to utilize this information going forward as we move into the capital improvement plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we continue with the presentation?
Chair McCoy, if I could just, this is Commissioner Parks, make a quick comment. I was shaking my head yes fervently to your comments, particularly about a survey for local kids. And I would love to make the recommendation, if it would be possible, for WRT or maybe the park staff to develop kind of a simplified version. The survey that is out is really meaningful, but it's quite robust in the number of questions and the number of options for each question. Wouldn't it be cool if we could simplify it a little bit and possibly partner with Fresno Unified School District and really do like a true survey of our local youth population? I think that would give us really meaningful data with which to work. So I just wanted to echo your comments, Chair McCoy.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. I'm sorry I couldn't see you right now.
And we have one more commissioner with their hand up, Commissioner Vang.
Commissioner Vang, you have the floor.
Yeah, I also want to add that I think for the future survey, it would be important that we also partnership with our community-based organization, who also play a lot of big part, or our city who advocate for our families, like with Fresno Center, some other African American church, and we also have some local organization that works with like this, when they have the tournaments for soccer, baseball, and football leagues in our parks. And I think it would be important that we should have surveyed those family. Somebody should have been out there on a Saturday or a Sunday asking for family, hey, can you do a survey? Because I live by Melody, and I also is nearby, I think, Raka, and they do have sport, especially on weekends, and it doesn't make sense that, I know we're in a pandemic, but it would also be helpful that we also have staff out there with a Apple or one of those Galaxy tablets and just survey families, or have a QR code out there at the parks, and so they could scan. I know a lot of people are into QR code now, and like a lawn sign, and they just click on it, and they also do survey. I myself, I was really sick and I caught COVID, and so I wasn't able to do a lot of outreach among families, and so I was sick for 3 weeks. I was dying, really. So I mean, I want to apologize on behalf of my community, and also I sent text as much as I could, but I think maybe with having our new parks director now, and also with our assistant director, they can also do some, announcement to the people that we partner up with at the park, with our local park. So that's my comment. Thank you.
And Commissioner Vang, our signs do have the QR codes in the 4 different languages, and that's something that we felt important to put on those. So we do have those, and hope that was easy enough for folks to use. So that was an added feature to the banners as well as our signs. So
Thank you. Are they at all parks, or are they just at certain big parks?
I believe we have a slide that was just shown, and it'll give you the list of all the parks and banners where they were posted.
When you announced the banners and the sign at the parks, did you guys do like a message out there on Facebook, or a message like, I know I mentioned maybe we could also put it on Fresno B. Did we do something like that with Fresno B and letting our family knows, and some of our local organization? Did we reach out to them at all?
I'd have to go back. There's again another slide that shows what we did, but I know social media was obviously used, as well as other our community affairs office, council members, the mayor's office, and his contacts. So it was distributed quite a few.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we have no further questions, we are going to continue on with the presentation, and I pass it back over to WRT.
Thank you, Chair McCoy and Commission. Coming back to what the survey is trying to help us decide and make recommendations about. We have 2 categories. The first being our existing parks, and the second being prioritizing locations for future parks, both under Measure P. So we'll walk through our progress on both of those counts. And tonight, we are hoping for recommendations from the Commission on both of these categories. So starting with existing parks, the Commission moved on January 10th to approve the park prioritization framework as presented. And that is represented by this diagram on the left, which shows 6 factors that should influence our prioritization of existing parks. And the Commission moved to weight those factors according to the responses of all commissioners that were in attendance. So we received those votes on weighting that the commissioners made. And as a result, 4 of the factors were given weightings of higher than average, and 3 were given weightings of equal importance. So we've translated that to a weighting system, which gives points. So we're saying that higher than average, factors that are of higher than average importance should get 3 points. Factors that were of equal importance should get 2 points. There were no factors that were determined to get lower than average. So that was that. Then the piece that we had to nuance a little bit was the emerging priority parks, which is the parks that were receiving votes on the online survey. And while this was felt to be higher than average, we wanted to acknowledge or recognize that some parks received a lot more votes than others. So we created a scale of 1 to 3. So some parks that received just a little bit of community support on the survey maybe got 1 point. Parks that received a fair amount, a moderate amount of support got 2 points. And parks that were identified as high priorities by a lot of folks got 3 points in that category. But again, the importance here to recognize is that these categories were all weighted so that the individual influence of any one of these factors is diminished because it's fed into this, this set of factors. So, and you've seen these slides already, but when we bring all those factors together, the parks that received the most points on that weighting scoring system were, starting from the top, Vinland, Einstein, Quigley, Logan, El Dorado, River Bottom, Roding, Ninth and Tulare, Grannies, and then it goes on. And we've included 4 pages of these parks that received points, that received at least 1 point, and just a small number of parks at the bottom didn't receive points in any of these categories. We've also created a separate list which only shows the parks that are in highest need neighborhoods. And this comes back to a really important work that we did during the fall and in the early part of the winter to make that definition of highest need neighborhoods. So the parks that are highest scoring and are in highest need neighborhoods are shown on this list. And the key point is that at least 50% of Measure P funding for existing parks must be used at parks that are in highest need neighborhoods. So this list matters a lot, or potentially matters a lot if we continue to make recommendations based on this framework. So now what we're showing on this map, and I think this is a new map for this group, it's a really important one, is the parks that are highest scoring based on this framework, which incorporates all of these factors, overlaid on a map of the highest need neighborhoods as this commission recommended and the council endorsed. So what we see is, first of all, the top scoring parks. You can see them in the biggest red circles on the map. Vinland, Einstein, Quigley, Logan, El Dorado. Those top 5 actually are not in highest need neighborhoods. But we also can see in this second table on the lower left, the parks that are in highest need neighborhoods and also scored highly on our list based on all of these factors. And here we see Roding Regional, we see Ninth and Tulare, Basin XX, Romaine, Frank H. Ball, Mariella Brown, Holmes, and Dickey Playground. And we could continue this list, and then we can go back. We can refer back to the larger lists that these are pulled from. 2 of these sites, we're putting those in italics just because we understand that there are limitations to the value that those park sites may provide. So we acknowledge that, not that they couldn't maybe provide good value, but that they're not seen necessarily as great candidates. So with that, we would like to give the commission an opportunity to make a formal recommendation on how to prioritize existing parks. And we might offer as a starting point that the commission would continue to use this framework and prioritize the parks that are receiving the highest number of points in this scoring framework, but it is your decision to make. And again, we could stop and Commissioner McCoy and do this vote now. I think that's generally how we've been doing it, or we could continue on into the new future parks category.
No, we could take questions. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could interject, we may want to just take questions, but perhaps you may elect to go out for public comment at the very end, and then the commission can make its recommendations for all two categories.
Makes sense.
Three categories, excuse me.
Yes.
And Chair McCoy, we do have two commissioners with their hands up, Commissioner Dolan and Commissioner Barraza.
Commissioner Barraza?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is for John. I know I've asked this question before, but I just want to get like an update on the interpretation or the inclusion of parks that are outside the 33 percentile that was approved by the council, which is the policy now. The ones that are adjacent to, very close to the 33 percentile, which basically are not in the zone, but they are very close to a high need area. What's the approach with those facilities?
Mr. Barraza, I'll take this question. I do recall responding to an email from you regarding this issue, and the city has taken a position that if it's not within the boundaries of the census tract, that it is not considered a highest needs neighborhood for the definition purposes.
That answers the question. I couldn't really say anything different, Commissioner Barraza.
Okay, I kind of lost part of the wording of the statement. Okay, that's fine. But I think there was some at the last meeting there was a different reference to those areas. Okay.
There was a point about existing parks that are adjacent to gap areas. So
okay,
it
there you
didn't
go.
have anything to do with high need, but it did have to do with gap areas.
Could you define or explain what gap areas are?
And so, yeah, so gap areas are through the 2018 Parks Master Plan. We had identified which areas of the city were served by parks and which areas of the city were not served by parks. And through our process with you all over the last several meetings, we have given some extra credit to existing parks that are adjacent to these gap areas, because the theory being, if you put a little work into an existing park, that it's going to be able to serve that adjacent community that is more park deficient. It's going to be able to do a better job of that. So it's one of these many criteria that Peter just walked through and is shown here on the screen.
Very, very helpful. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, yep, yeah. It wasn't highest need, but it was a gap area. So that has been included and is part of these factors.
Vice Chair Dolan, oh, sorry, Commissioner Barraza, do you have any more questions?
No, that was the only question. And I know that this applied only to the existing parks. It doesn't apply to new areas. So I think it's been clarified. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dolan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, Peter, a very quick and specific question. Could you go back to the slide that listed out the parks that, I'm sorry, it was the one that showed, you mentioned something about basin. Yes, okay, that's the one. And you said these are in italics because you don't think they're worth investment. And this is just my own ignorance. What is it about these two parks, 9th and Tulare and Basin XX, that set them out of that scope? And I apologize.
That's a good question. I'll try to answer, but I might need some support from city staff. Sure. I think Basin XX is not owned by the Parks Department. It's actually operated by the storm. I don't remember the name of the storm drainage
It's mained and owned by the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control
I got you.
District.
Okay.
Flood
So
control
not even a
district.
city park per se. Okay.
That's the issue there. And then 9th and Tulare is it's a very narrow property along a pretty busy road. So, you know, that has potential for improvement, but it's hard to, it's maybe going to be hard to make it feel like a full-fledged park.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very small little strip of remnant land that was deeded to the city. It's in the Parks Department, but it's really only about 20 feet wide on a busy street. It just really isn't going to have a lot of utility. It's still in the list because it's on the list as a park space, but we just wanted to extend that list a little deeper because in the end, 9th and Tulare and Basin X just may not really be subject for improvements.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Just a quick follow-up with that 9th and Tulare. Is there any opportunity, we've talked about new parks and acquiring or developing land that the city owns or could own. Is there any chance to expand on something like 9th and Tulare, which apparently meets a lot of criteria except for the actual spatial configurations?
I'm not aware that there is, but I think that's why we also just left it in the list, is because geographically and certain criteria, it's where it is on the list, and we're going to let staff and council, give greater direction as to if there is anything that can be done with that. And we're not aware of anything, any ability to expand 9th and Tulare at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have any other commissioners that have questions?
There are no hands up at this time.
Thank you. I can turn it back over to WRT.
Okay, great. So we'll continue on and we'll look at the prioritization process for Newport sites. Again, the commission on January 10th made a motion to approve the prioritization framework, which is represented by this diagram. Again, similar format, a series of factors which together we felt would be a really important framework to think about future park sites. And the commission approved that prioritization framework, and with the understanding that a new map would be created, but at the time we voted on that framework, we didn't yet have a map that would be expressed by this framework. So we'll show that tonight. So the map, which results from that framework, I'm going to walk through each of those framework elements and show how they all influence our thinking about where are good future park sites. So the first map here is indicating areas of Fresno that are right now access gaps. They're access gaps from parks, or at least from parks that have reasonable recreational amenities. So where you see holes in this map, white spaces, those are actually parts of the city that have good access to parks right now. So those areas we're saying are not high priorities right off the bat for future parks. The second factor here, priority areas and sites for new parks that were brought to us in a pretty extensive community engagement process, 2017, 2018, as part of the Parks Master Plan effort. And all of these dots here you're seeing are locations that people identified as being areas where there should or could be a future park in Fresno. And as Hannah was describing before, we've done kind of what we call a heat map exercise to kind of create, recognize that in some cases people aren't being super specific about the location. So we want to be a little bit more general about the general locations where people are seeing the need for future parks. Similarly, the survey, we displayed the results to this question earlier in the presentation. So these responses are also a factor that we want to take into account. So again, it's one factor of several that go into this calculus. And then there are a couple of factors which are parcel specific, or at least location specific. One of those is the general plan, which has maintained a really useful database of sites that have been identified in other planning processes, more specific, specific plans that have been developed over the years in Fresno, some of the other planning work. And you can see those parcels in blue. Those are parcels that have been identified as potential future park sites. So we want to recognize those and potentially look for opportunities to realize some of those sites. And then similarly, there are pipeline parks, and we've talked about these earlier in our process together, sites that the city has already committed to making improvements at these sites. So we've got Fresno Barrios, a site at South Tower, in South Tower District, Broadway and Elizabeth, Van Ness Triangle Park, The Link, the Citywide Senior Center, Bulldog and Sixth, and Milburn, Dakota. Each of these sites has received commitments from the city. And so I think it's useful to understand where they are in terms of areas of need. So when we bring all of these factors together, we're seeing the map that's shown here on the right, which the lighter pink color is showing areas that are in park access gaps. And then it's fading up, intensifying to a red color where either it's a high population density area or it's an area that received a lot of comments, a lot of responses from people, either during the park's master plan update process when we had all that community engagement, or on this current online survey. And overlaid on this heat map, we're seeing the specific locations of sites that are identified in the general plan and the pipeline parks. So this could be a really, really valuable, I think, resource for going forward for thinking about where the best opportunities are for future parks. And with that, again, turning it over, or we will be turning it over, I think, after public comments to hopefully a commission recommendation about how to proceed future park locations.
So we can engage any commissioners for questions at this point, and then we have one more section to walk through.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the commissioners on what we've seen so far?
Commissioner Apuda and Commissioner Parks have their hands raised.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, WRT, for the presentation. I don't have a question, but I'd like to see the previous slide again, please. Thank you. If I could just have a moment. And the blue circles, those are the pipeline projects?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Parks, you have the floor.
Thank you. Quick question on the slide relating to other plans, and we see the general plan proposed locations in navy blue, dark blue. Are those sites currently owned by the city and zoned as parks?
Great question. Again, I'll start, but please, city staff might need to back me up. It could be that some of those sites are under city ownership and some are not. If they're not under city ownership, if they're not public land, then they also have another general plan designation, which enables them to be something else. But they are also sort of identified sort of as a additional layer as a potential park site.
Do we have any other questions for WRT on the presentation we've seen so far?
Commissioner Dolan has the same.
Commissioner Dolan, you have the floor.
Thanks. Peter, can you go to that same slide that Dr. Opuda asked to see with the pipeline projects, the overlay? So first of all, kudos on a really great presentation. This last one in particular, I think like the thinking here is really clear. It's really rich. Laying these different data over each other like this is really, really helpful. And I think it's it's a model of clarity, so I really appreciate it. Can you, and I think, again, Dr. Oputa may have asked this same question. I know that we've got this list of pipeline projects and they're clearly marked on the map. What does it mean to be, is it like they're already starting to be developed as parks? They are clearly identified as that's where we're going. Could you just say a little bit more about the definition of pipeline?
Yeah, Commissioner Dolan, I can take that one. So for the purposes of this presentation and that word pipeline that we've been using kind of throughout the last few months getting to this point is that those projects received funding in our fiscal year 22 budget. And so, for example, South Tower, Venice, Triangle Park, those are projects that were approved in the mayor's budget that then was adopted by City Council. So they have received Measure P monies. And they are funded through bucket 2 because they are new park locations, not existing park locations.
Okay.
Fresno, Barrios Unidos, though, that is just, that was more of a grant that was, provided through Measure P, not specifically a new park location.
Okay.
And that was at the direction of City Council.
So forgive me, I'm going to use some imprecise language here, but so is it safe to say like these are done deals? So in that sense, we can take them off the table from the commission's consideration of where park expansion should be because it's already happening here.
So hear me out. And I think it's really important that pipeline is considered, and that's why it's part of something that you all need to look at. And the reason being that, as you know, to build a new park takes a lot of money. And so not all of these parks receive the same amount of money, and not all of them need the same amount of money to be developed. So for the most part, all of them will need additional funding in fiscal year 23 in order to bring them to fruition. So they are essentially multi-year projects because they're pretty heavy lifts. So we wanted to call out that they're pipeline and that they will more than likely need funds in fiscal year 23. And even if the commission doesn't recommend them to, City Council or the mayor may propose to provide these parks additional monies.
Fair enough. Would it be possible at some point, not tonight's presentation, obviously, but at some point see what is already pledged towards or budgeted towards these pipeline projects, what the expected total spend is going to need and where the shortfall is so that we would have some idea, oh, a little bit of money will go a long way, or we're basically starting from ground zero on some of these?
Yeah, so we, let me take a step back here. We include these projects in our capital projects update that we provide you, that we just gave you in our last meeting. So we try not to get into the nitty gritty of monies, but we do provide you a status of like scope, right? And how far along the project is and what additional steps need to be taken in order to complete the project. And we try and shy away a little bit about just focusing in on monies only because that changes, right? And then it kind of is dependent on what the mayor proposes in City Council. So we don't want to get too bogged down in the numbers, but yeah, providing the status, I think will really help you all see if it's in construction or in design, so you know additional funding that may be needed.
Great. Thanks, Aldi.
Commissioner Cummings, do you have any comments?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't right at this moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Vang, do you have any comments or questions?
The only comments I have is this will be going to City Council to consider, and then will this come back to us to review, or the City Council member make the final decision?
Great question, Commissioner Banks. So you all will make recommendations. This is your first set of recommendations related to the Parks Department budget as it pertains to Measure P and General Fund. Once you complete these recommendations, they will go to City Council via a tray memo. They will also be used to help inform staff as we prepare our fiscal year 23 budget. And then when the mayor comes out with his proposed budget around May or June, that will come back to you all, and you will have the opportunity to weigh in on the Measure P component of the Parks Department budget.
So if we don't agree on the survey, we want to make additional recommendation, are we allowed to? Or do we have to follow what the survey inquired? Or just a question?
So, Yeah, great question. So I would encourage you not to get too bogged down in what has happened thus far. I absolutely hear the commission and all the extra steps we can take as a group to reach a different groups within our city. And I think that's things we can take going forward. We've just hired a community outreach specialist in our department, and so we are going to have some help with that heavy. But in terms of going backwards, that survey was really, as you can see on even this slide, a bubble within multiple other things that are considered as you all make recommendations. So while 900 is not at all encompassing the city and all the people that it represents, it is a pretty good snapshot. If you think about community meetings, I have never seen 900 through a series of community meetings. So it does speak volumes, and I don't want to negate all the people that took the time to fill out the survey. I think 100% we have a lot of room to grow and continue, and we're hearing you and we're writing down the recommendations that you all are mentioning, and we'll continue on with those efforts after you make these recommendations. And you have a second shot at it to make recommendations after the mayor comes out, and so we can continue to see those survey results even through then.
All right, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that.
All right, I turn it back over to WRT.
Okay, the last piece here is talking about recreation-based strategies. This is a thread that we've been talking about, and I'm going to do it in a little bit of an abbreviated manner here for us. So the point of the recreation-based strategy, what is it that we're talking about? So it's considered in addition to the park prioritization that we've just covered. What this is saying is that where the park prioritization was really focused on a specific park, this is about amenity improvements that can be made in many parks across the system. And what we've simply created are a series of themes that you all, and also that we've heard through the community survey, that these themes can be used by staff. It just informs their subsequent process to begin to develop more amenity-based improvement projects. And these would apply to subsequent capital improvement plans. So that's what we're talking about here. And then we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So from the recent community survey where we asked about 3 items regarding existing parks that need to be addressed, and we saw a lot about poor condition of facilities, about lack of activation, some security concerns, bathrooms not being maintained, a little bit more about security, shade, facilities, amenities, just a lot of real basic kind of concerns that we're starting to see across the boards in some of these parks. Question 4 was about amenities and facilities more specifically that are needed. And Hannah had presented these earlier: natural areas, trails, pickleball courts, dog parks, playgrounds, community centers, picnic areas and shelters, soccer fields, some of the top responses. So these were folded into the high-level conversation that you all had on January 10th, where we talked about climate change and the need for shade and cooling through trees and structures, climate change bringing greater attention to conservation of water, of future drought cycles, the need to provide drinking fountains and bottle fillers within our parks, places for family gathering, the general character of parks. Are they welcoming? Understanding our unhoused populations, understanding some of their needs within parks, but also about safety, security, and we talked about some active transportation needs, connectivity between parks and getting into parks. So just from all of these themes, we put together, or from all these conversations and these points of input, we put together 6 high-level themes that all had some descriptions within them. And we've summarized them all on one slide just for the brevity of this group. We have them available and we could walk through in detail, but we thought this was maybe a better use of everyone's time. So the first theme is about climate resilience, really focusing on heat, has to do with providing drinking fountains, providing shade through trees and through structures, recognizing the importance of water, improvements to irrigation systems for water conservation, turf reduction programs, et cetera. We also talked about, I think I've actually combined climate resilience of heat, climate resilience of drought. Again, those irrigation systems, plant conversions, et cetera, in particular. Third category, creating welcoming and safe parks. This has to do with entry improvements, has to do with safety and security within our parks, the general attractiveness of parks, and addressing the full diversity of our park users, our unhoused population as well. The fourth theme was about really basic comfort and usability, and recognizing that that's really been an issue across the board in a lot of parks. So this could be improvement programs for specific amenities. For example, playground renovations, bathroom renovations, field renovations, just going in a very targeted way into a park and making a very specific improvement. Inclusion and accessibility, making sure that parks serve all ages, all users, anything from pickleball, anything from all ages playgrounds, accessibility upgrades, which are necessary across the park system. This would be something that would capture those types of projects. And lastly, we heard from the survey, it was discussed by this commission, just the value of trails, the value of getting to parks safely. And so this really emerged as the sixth theme. I'm not going to walk through them in great detail, but I think if we just click quickly through, you can see this was the text that we had presented last time. And Peter, if you could just skip all the way to the recommendation. And again, this is not making a very specific recommendation. This is simply saying that you all would recommend to council that park improvements address these thematic priorities, that these themes are going to inform staff as they develop amenity-based improvement projects. And that's the long and the short of this section. And I think with that, we have completed our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions on this topic.
Thank you, WRT, for the presentation. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You will have up to 3 minutes.
I think you may have a commission question on just that last number 5 item first. And I do see a hand up.
Does any, okay, I can't see the hand.
So Commissioner Dolan and Commissioner Oputa both have their hands raised.
Vice Chair Dolan, you have the floor.
Yeah, can you advance the slide to there? So I appreciate, first of all, I applaud your recognition of climate resilience, both in terms of water and shade, as being key components here. But I have to say that it seems to me then you go to a very weak maneuver in the next slide where you say like, oh, we should just recommend that these things are all recognized instead of giving the commission the responsibility to sort of put these in a hierarchy of needs. If we don't have welcoming and safe parks, none of these other factors are going to make one bit of difference. If you are not safe and secure going to a park, it doesn't matter how resilient it is or what the fields look like or anything else. So I just think to say like, well, here's your suite of, and forgive me, pretty broad and obvious things that we want to do. Okay, those aren't much in the way of recommendations to guide any sort of planning, are they? So I would just say, I think our responsibility as commissioners is to really elevate some of these, or look at these in a hierarchy, because in any planning process, you're going to be looking at a hierarchy. So I just want to make that comment.
Dr. Oputa, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think the question that I have is, I understand that these themes, which, as I told you last time, I really applaud how you've listened and frame these, I need some help in understanding how city staff will use these to inform their decision making. So I have no concerns with the themes, but just the process of using them.
That's a great question, Commissioner Puda, and I'm glad you asked, because I think that's something we need to have to be able to come to fruition with this conversation. And you know, it's a very important task that you as a commission have to make recommendations to council related to measure P dollars in the parks budget in general. And so the way in which WRT has been, you know, engaged to help facilitate that is, right, we have a lot of data, both with the master plan, with the outreach, and then with you all and your vote and your, you know, your voices. And so we really wanted to come up with a systematic approach, you know, not too much relying on just opinion and feelings, and how do we get back to facts to inform us and data to inform us. And so this was a way to kind of bring things up to the surface for you all then to have a discussion about. And like Commissioner Dolan alluded to, if you guys choose and decide that these needed to be ranked, and that's how you all feel comfortable making that recommendation, by all means, that's an option. What we didn't want the commission to get bogged down in is making project-specific recommendations, because their city is so big and there's so much need out there that we wanted you to really hone in on bring to us and to the city council what areas need focusing, you know, of existing and of new park space, and what are these themes that are important. So then staff can go back and do, you know, the job we're hired to do, which is go look at our parks and do site visits and see from the master plan what has been completed, what's already in the works, you know, what would be our best value right here, you know, knowing the mayor's priorities and the council's priorities, you know, what type of project is going to get approved right now, taking all of those things into factor to be able to then put a budget together. And so this informs us to be able to go back and say, okay, the commission's saying these are important, you know, inclusion and accessibility. Well, we know, you know, inspiration already has that. And so we kind of go through the priority parks that you all pull up and be able to make a decision from there related to project specific and dollar specific. I hope that answered your question.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for WRT from the commissioners?
There's no question for WRT. This is kind of a question towards actually Vice Chair Dolan. Since this is supposed to be a discussion forum, as per Aldi, what is a welcoming and safe park to you, Vice Chair Dolan?
Yeah, I'm focusing in on if I go to a park where I feel unsafe, I'm not going to be able to enjoy anything else about it, and I won't go to that park. And we saw in the response to the survey that is listed at the top of most people's, you know, needs around what the park should be. So I'm just arguing that if we look at this as thematic improvements, these are all great, but they're also like, well, yes, of course, we want them to be comfortable, inclusive, and have trails. But I think if we just give this as a suite of options, they're all good to us, we're not actually asking the city and our parks department to focus in on what the public says is most important to them and what is probably preventing people from using some of these parks as they stand right now, right? Which is a feeling of being unwelcomed and unsafe. And I think the welcoming part, and perhaps this is where you're going, Commissioner, is also something that could incorporate things like multi-language signage and things like that. And it should be something that welcomes all people. But I'm focusing in on the safe part, because I think to elide that as a minor issue, like, oh, they got to be safe, is to miss a huge part of what people need to have in a park that they want to use. So I don't know if that answers your question.
So I was actually focusing on the safe part too. So what makes a park safe?
Feeling that there is, in my mind, a feeling that you can enjoy it without fear of being harassed or otherwise witness to events that make you feel unsafe, that you can go into the bathrooms or other parts of the facility and know that they'll be safe. I mean, there's a whole list of things. It's the same thing, what makes you feel safe on a city street as far as that goes.
Okay, I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that, since you were proposing that that should be at the top of the hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as a tenant in a park, I see this every day, and I think this like really impacts people's use of a park. And I hear it all the time as well. It's like, oh, you know, what makes me, you know, hesitate to come visit your facilities? I don't feel safe in the park. So I think that can be broadly conceived, and I don't think it has to be a punitive thing, but if people don't feel safe, it's going to interfere with everything else.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Barraza and Commissioner Apuda also have their hands raised.
Commissioner Barraza, you have the floor.
Hello, Commissioner Barraza, you have the floor. Commissioner Barraza? Looks like he may be having some technical difficulties. I know he was saying it was hard to hear earlier and he was cutting out a bit.
Okay, we'll come back. Dr. Apuda, you have the floor.
I do. There's just one thing I feel a need to say as we talk about safety in parks. I would be remiss if I didn't give voice to I'm trying to choose my words carefully. If I didn't give voice to perceptions of safety, particularly as it relates to individuals and groups in a park. And so when we are looking at issues of inclusion, this doesn't have a lot to do with decisions we need to make tonight. But as a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, I have to speak on our giving thought to oftentimes people feel unsafe by virtue of who they are looking at. And so as we talk about safety, let's just be aware of that when people say they aren't safe, sometimes that perception is based on class, race, etc. So it's not necessarily a comment related to today's decision making, but I'm feeling it in my bones as we talk about safety, and just to keep in our mind what that means sometimes to people. That it isn't that they aren't safe, but certain people make them feel unsafe, and that's their perception. Thank you for hearing me out.
I think that's an incredibly wise thing to say, and I think it's incredibly important to say. But I also say then we have education to do and everything else, but I don't think we can simply ignore people's statement that there are certain parks that make them feel unsafe in every neighborhood. I don't know, perhaps that's just something we need to chalk up to public safety.
Do we have any other questions or comments regarding this presentation?
There are no additional commissioner hands in Zoom or in the council chamber.
Thank you.
I would just like to echo Dr. Aputa's comments on safety. I agree that some people can come to a park and it depends on the people that are in the park that makes them feel unsafe. So we have to be careful when we talk about safety in the park because there are many elements that can make a park unsafe. We have a homeless population that we're trying to get under control, especially at the big regional parks like Rodian Park, Woodward Park. I mean, when you go to those parks, you see it. You know, we have to make sure that our children are safe when they're going to the bathrooms at all parks, not just some parks in some part of towns. All parks need to be made safe. So I think we have to be careful when we talk about safety in our parks because it can turn into a whole different conversation. So general across the board, all of our parks need to be safe and welcoming for our whole entire city of Fresno, not just one part, not just for one particular group, but for everyone. And thank you for allowing me to make that comment. And I will go out to the public now. Would any member of the public like to make a comment in regards to this presentation? You will have up to 3 minutes.
If any member of the public on Zoom would like to address the commissioners, please raise your digital hand. And if there's anyone in the council chamber who would like to address the commission, please let us know. And now's the time to raise your digital hand if you'd like to address the commission. And it appears we have no hands on Zoom. And anyone in the council chamber? Please go. We have a member of the public in the council chamber that would like to address the commission.
Okay.
Test. Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Eric Payne. I'm the executive director of the Central Valley Urban Institute. And relative to the guiding principles that you all have outlined in the budget presentation today, one of the things that I would like to elevate and uplift and ask that you center as you move forward in these discussions and finalize what your priorities are going to be this next year. It is imperative that we get this right. There are so many people who are looking to you for guidance and for leadership, and more importantly, our kids are depending on you. And when we talk about prevention, intervention, and the misconceptions and misperceptions of safety, I'd ask that you look to community benefit organizations as a partner in this work. And what that means is the necessary resources that will need to be set aside to accomplish this, and to identify who those partners are going to be. And so with that, I will close with this. We are here with you, we are supporting you, and we are ready to help. Thank you.
And we do have a member of the public on Zoom that would also like to speak. It is B.T. Lewis. All right. B.T. Lewis, you can unmute yourself and your time will begin when you start to speak.
All right. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. I went back and forth and debated whether or not this was something appropriate to share, but I do have some concerns about public safety in our parks. Our church was born in Roding Park. That's where we first gathered in 1979. And for 30 years, we gathered there every year to celebrate the anniversary of our church. But about 10 years ago, we had to give that up because of an incident in one of the bathrooms that threatened one of our children. And so we have some grave concerns about public safety in some of our parks. And I'm just hopeful that this commission will put some things in place that will help us to feel comfortable reestablishing our presence in that particular park. That is the largest and biggest park in our area, the one that we favor the most. I don't want to drag our members across town to Woodward Park for an annual picnic. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. The other thing is that I do share your concerns and applaud your recognition of the fact that surveys are difficult to get to many in our population. Many people that we serve in our community simply just don't have the technology to take the survey, and then surveys are a hard sell, even with the technology. So thank you so much for your work. I think your work is valuable. I think that you are on the right track and contributing to a better park presence in our city. And that's it.
Thank you. And any other members of the public would like to address the commission? Please raise your digital hand at this time. And seeing none, I will hand it back to Chair McCoy.
Thank you, City Clerk. Does any member of the commission have any questions or comments regarding this item?
And there are no hands on Zoom. And looks like we are good in the council chamber as well.
Okay. Do I have a motion from a member of the commission regarding adoption of the FY23 Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans recommendations for City Council's consideration?
Chair McCoy, this is Commissioner Parks. I apologize. I guess I'm just a little bit confused about what we're being asked to motion or approve this evening. Could we get a little guidance from WRT or city staff about what we're trying to accomplish here tonight?
I can take a stab at that. Great question, Commissioner Parks. So we've had a lot of discussion. So I think we need to revisit the three phases of the presentation that were given tonight. So the first component was related to existing park prioritization. John or Peter, if you want to go back a slide that kind of lists. So here were, WRT did the exercise of pulling the data together and kind of, simplifying it in a way that you all could see. And we want you to make a recommendation related to, the list of existing parks that you would like to recommend to City Council for consideration in the fiscal year 23 budget. Similarly, for the new park space, it's a little harder to have just a list. And so it's more of this map and adopting this map and recommending City Council and to staff to follow as we move forward with building our budget around bucket 2. And then in relation to the thematic priorities, you all are welcome to continue to have a discussion and morph that recommendation. But an option would be to recommend those park improvement thematic priorities so that we can consider them both at new park locations and existing parks as we build our budget with essentially buckets 1 and 2.
And Aldi, a follow-up question about the first section that we reviewed. I'm trying to understand how this is actually going to play out in reality. So if our commission tonight recommended to approve the prioritization as demonstrated in all of this data that we've seen, that's been very helpful, does that mean then that we would say, okay, we have X amount of money and we'll go from park number 1, prioritize number 1 to number 10 or till we run out of money, and then next year we'll focus on the next ones? Or particularly with the existing parks, because our entire park system needs work, right? I'm just trying to figure out how does this actually play out in the budgeting process this year?
Yeah, great question. And I don't have a crystal ball. So I wish I could tell you exactly how things are going to roll out, but taking from previous experience with any department budget, staff spends time formulating, a heavy part of bucket one is capital, but a heavy part of it is bringing our service level up, right? And so we as parks have money to do that, and we want to, not just mow grass every 2 weeks or once a month or, as often as the budget allows. We want to bring up the service level while we're also bringing up, capital improvements. And so we're going to look at each of those things as a team and how do we address, the parks that are coming up through what you all would be recommending and addressing service levels at those areas, assessing them for the needs. Do they have amenities that need to be replaced before we go adding additional things? Do they have additional things that we could add that would make a huge impact, right? Like low-hanging fruit, benches, trash cans, tables. And that's really something that's the heavy lift on staff, is to go back and do this based on the amount of money that we're going to have, right? Other things hit bucket one and not necessarily bucket two, but positions hit bucket one. And so there are multiple things coming out of these funding pots. So we didn't want the commission to get bogged down on spending specific dollars. Rather, leave that hard work in terms of, where do the dollars and the cents end up to staff, and really help give us priority areas to focus on, so we can go visit those sites, so we can relook at what have we done there, what still needs to be done, and where things shake out. The second component of that, right, is then that the administration will have the opportunity to weigh in on that budget. And then the third component is that council will have the opportunity. And so while we appreciate all of the, the work that you're doing and that staff is doing, sometimes it even changes at that level, and council makes decisions to change it. And so then we shift and we revert and we say, okay, what didn't get funded? Maybe we include that next year, etc. So it's kind of this flexible game that we play while trying to address priorities across the whole city.
Thank you, Aldi. I appreciate that. And then a follow-up question to the second section related to new parks. As city staff, as the Parks Department is developing, I guess it would be the capital improvement plan for new parks, as you're developing the budget and identifying potential park sites or park sites that have been known, do you recognize, I apologize, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. So in our previous meeting, we looked at the different stages of the development of a park, right? So as you're developing the budget for new park sites, do you identify, okay, we think in fiscal year 22, we'll get through the scoping phase or the design phase, and then we know that we're gonna need additional funding for this particular site in fiscal year 23 to get through construction? Do you kind of plan out in multi-years, or are we just looking at 1 year at a time? And the reason I'm asking about this is, in my experience with the Parkway, I've worked on projects that have been 10 years in the making, and I just want to be sure, because of all of the incredible public feedback and comment that we've been getting, that we are setting realistic expectations for when new park sites are going to be, to the ribbon cutting stage.
Yeah. You're spot on, Commissioner Parks. So that hasn't always been the past precedent in terms of budgeting capital projects across multi-years. But that is something that has been at the forefront of both the director and the administration's mind going forward. So that like you said, right, we don't overcommit and underdeliver. Right? We want to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately to what we're going to spend. And then the second part of that is we don't want to hold appropriations that could be used for other things, right? So if we fund a full capital project in a year and don't anticipate doing it, we're essentially holding money that could have been used for other things. And so it has been something that we have been talking about diligently, and that's why there's been a lot of emphasis on this 5-year capital plan. And this essentially helps us lay the foundation for that, which is we want to plan and make sure that projects that are going to be multiple years are funded for multiple years. The last thing we want to do, right, is be able to start a project and then not have funding the next year. And so, making sure that we stay engaged with the community, the administration and the council is very important because they have a big say when it comes to how those dollars are actually appropriated. So yes, that is the goal, and that is our intent, is to budget them over multiple years. If they take that long, if it's something that can be addressed this year, of course, then we will put the funding in this year to complete it. And the second component of that whole conversation is capacity, right? It takes people to implement projects. And so while at the same time that we are budgeting for projects, we are taking into consideration the impact that has on staff levels and adjusting accordingly, both through parks and public works.
Thanks, Aldi. I appreciate that comment, and I just would really like to affirm that I think it's really important, as much as possible, as new park sites are identified, that we're recognizing the longer than we would like to, oftentimes, timeline that it takes for them to come to fruition. And I would also like to just comment and make the recommendation that for the new park prioritization, if we could somehow incorporate funding in fiscal year 23, like the scoping phase, particularly in the highest needs neighborhoods, so that we can, even though we may not be able to get to construction and ribbon cutting, as I said, that we can demonstrate that it's really important that we're making at least that initial investment, that we're identifying park sites, that we're identifying park projects and funding, appropriate community input so these parks can come to fruition in the future. Thank you.
And Commissioner McCoy, Chair McCoy, we do have hands from Commissioner Barraza and Commissioner Apuda.
Commissioner Barraza, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What I'm trying is some of these factors that are identified on the diagram or the photo that you have on the screen right now. Those are new projects, and some of those projects seem to be in a state of evolution. In other words, there's information like the category emerging community priorities, the other one that says other plans, which is supposed to include the general plan proposed items. And then you have the pipeline parks that are also changing. I guess, the simplest way would be that we get a final list that shows the priorities of all the new projects, then we know what we're voting on. That's one point. The second point is, what is the deadline for this commission and for city staff to continue to get more information to arrive at that final list of projects that we will be recommending to the city council? Could you kind of review that timetable again to see when is the drop deadline that we have to act on a recommendation to the council?
Yeah, Commissioner Barraza, great question related, and I think that's a good reminder for all commission members and the public about, kind of the timeline on that we're headed here. And I know that WRT has a slide that references this as well, but essentially Parks has already started, right? This is a really, really heavy lift. We absorbed a lot of money, and so we are already working diligently on building our budget related to both the general fund and then other funding sources such as Measure P. So we wanted to make sure that we got your recommendations as early on as possible so that we can incorporate that information and really digest it and include those recommendations in our budget as we see fit. So we have to take our budget to the administration end of February and into March. And so we don't have a ton of time to get our budget together. And that is why we wanted to give you all the opportunity to make those recommendations ahead of us getting too far deep into our budget, so that we have a chance to step back and incorporate your recommendations. So after you make recommendations tonight, these will go to City Council via tray memo. So those will go directly to them, and then staff will incorporate your recommendations as we see fit into our budget.
Dr. Apuda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Um, I too am trying to understand process here. And Aldi, am I understanding that once we make our recommendations, you all as staff will create your budget based on these recommendations and other information you have? Will you then come back to us and say, based on the priorities that you all recommended and council approved, based on ABC, now here are our budget recommendations? Will you be coming back to us before things go to the council based on what we recommend tonight or sometime hereafter?
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Puda. And I may lean on Christy for this one, but based on the way that the ordinance is written, this is the way that has been interpreted to us by the city attorney's office, and explains how we can follow this process, but still honor the administration and the council's part that they play in budget. And so it will not come back to you before the mayor takes his budget forward.
Okay.
I'll just add to that real quick. While the Parks Department budget as presented to the mayor will not come back to you prior to the mayor releasing his budget, you will get to make further recommendations after the mayor's budget is released with regard to Measure P projects and funding.
And those recommendations will go back to City Council. So before it's actually voted on and codified, your voice will be heard again by both park staff, the community, and the council members.
Okay. The other thing that I think I'd like to do at this point, we have the three different issues in front of us. We have the existing parks recommendation, the new parks recommendations, and then the themes. And I'm hearing that perhaps we still have some conversations around the themes. I would like to, if I may, make a motion that we set aside the themes issue for tonight and focus on looking at the recommendations related to existing parks and new parks. So that is a motion. Let's set that aside for now and continue conversations based on some of the issues that have been raised this evening, in particular by Vice Chair Dolan, and just concentrate on the recommendations around existing parks and new parks.
So Chair McCoy, you would want to see if there's a second to that motion.
Is there a second to Dr. Apuda's motion?
I'll second it. This is Cummings.
Commissioner Cummings has seconded. Can we conduct a roll call?
You may want to see if any commission members have any comments related to that motion prior to taking a roll call vote.
Thank you. Do we have, Commissioner Vane, do you have a comment in regards to that motion?
I had a comment, and also I was just wanted to clarify the motion just so I understand better. And then the question I have is, when we're developing this, are we looking at the master plan for the parks too? Because we were given the binder at the beginning of the term, and does it match up? Does WRT goes back and kind of price them together and to ensure that they're kind of like, is because the book looks really good, and there's a lot of community and citizen who put a lot of effort into the master plan, and I don't know if we reflect on that master plan at all. Can someone answer that?
So Commissioner Ving, I think I heard you. It's a little bit muffled, but both the existing park and new park analysis that WRT did definitely took into account the master plan. So you'll see even on the slide presented in front of you right now, there are two bubbles that pulled data directly from the master plan. This is important for the Parks Department because, like you mentioned, a lot of energy and effort and community input was put into the master plan, and we didn't want to negate that. And so there were factors both when considering how to prioritize existing parks as well as new park prioritization. We took into account factors from the master plan. So you can see, as an example, WRT is moving slides, but for existing park prioritization, they took into account 4 factors related specifically to data that was pulled out of the master plan.
Thank you. And then can we clarify Dr. Aputa's motion? I just want to be a little bit more clear.
I will clarify it for you. I simply moved that we set aside for the moment making any recommendations related to the themes.
And real quick, as just to clarify, Dr. Aputa, when you say set aside, my understanding was for a future commission meeting. Do you mean later this evening or just a future commission meeting?
A future commission meeting.
Okay,
for
thank
ongoing conversations around.
Perfect. That's how I understood it. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense. Thank you, Dr. Aputa. Just wanted to thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Barraza, you have the floor.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just have a question. I understand the part about taking action on the methodology or the factors that are identified there to know what the priority of parks are for existing and for new parks. The question is there a list of that list that is produced from this methodology that we're acting on? Are we approving a specific list of projects? If you could show me this appears to be the existing and then the new parts. Would you please just show me the list?
So Commissioner Barraza, first let's deal with existing. So there is this list, and there's also the more fine-tuned list where they pulled up the top 5 out of both high need areas and non-high need areas to give you all an opportunity to vote, the way that you see fit. We didn't want to essentially bake the pie and bring it to you. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to see the data a few different ways. So you could see the previous slide he was showing was, a list of 1 through 20, right? Where did things shake out in terms of priorities after considering all the factors in the columns blue through all the way to the right. And then that other slide that he was on that pulls out the top 5 in both high need areas and non-high need areas for existing parks is another way to look at it. And as Commissioner Dr. Aputa was saying, right, and Commissioner Parks, right, we don't want to spread the money too thin because we know that it does take a lot of capital money when you're putting it towards projects. And so we wanted to pull up, here are 5 from non-high need areas and 5 from high need areas. You could choose to vote on this. You could choose to vote on the list of 20 that surfaced. That was kind of a decision that was left to all of you to decide, but we just wanted to provide you some guidance on how to get there. In terms of the new park area, there's not a list because the data that we have isn't pulling specific areas. There's no way to define them other than areas on a map. And so essentially this is a heat map to show you that based on the data pulled from the left-hand side, right, the master plan, the community, the general plan, and then where money is currently funded in fiscal year 22, that map reflects where that investment is needed. So essentially the deep red is what comes up and says, these are the areas that need attention and need investment. And so the proposition to you all would be to essentially recommend this map, or you could choose to take it a level further, like Commissioner Parks alluded to, right, and recommending money for the pipeline projects. You could do a combination of both, but essentially this was a way for us to give you the data and for you to have a conversation and make recommendations that feel comfortable for you and the communities that you represent.
Let me just read something here so that you can tell me if my understanding is correct. What you show on the screen right now is basically the factors that will be taken into consideration in setting the priorities for new parks, but it's an incomplete list because there's information that's still being developed. Am I correct in that statement?
I'm not understanding your statement.
Okay. I'm trying to, as it pertains to new parks, what I understood you said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you said that this basically illustrates all the factors that are going to be taken into consideration to identify the projects that will be selected for funding their new parks. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects listed there. That's a partial list. So we are not able to see yet a complete list. Is that correct or not?
No, that's not correct. We don't have a list that we're formulating that we haven't shown you. That list right there is just projects that are currently funded out of bucket 2. So money for new park space, those are the projects that are currently funded. They will likely need additional funding in next year. There are some exceptions like Fresno Barrios. That was essentially a grant through council to that organization. So that won't necessarily need additional funds, but we know, for example, South Tower, Van Ness, those will need additional funds, and the mayor or the council may likely put money towards those regardless of what we say. So we wanted you to consider them, but also consider, the master plan. What is the community currently saying? What is the general plan saying? And then of course you can take into other things. I mean, you represent a community, and that's, why you're representing as a commission member. And so of course there are other things that you
So we don't, so we don't have a list, but we just have the factors that are being considered to determine the priorities. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I like that. Okay, that's good. Now, just a quick thing on the existing parks. Are those is the approach the same, or are we identifying specific projects under the existing parks?
You're not identifying specific projects, rather you're identifying park locations. So this is a little different because they're not new, they are existing. And so we do need to identify a park. And so there are multiple ways you could do this, right? You could pull those top 5 listed on here from both outside the highest need areas and within, and you could recommend that council focus on those in the fiscal year 23 budget. You could recommend that all 20 parks that came up through the ranking, we could focus on those, but just remember that bucket 1, while it may seem like a lot of money, is going to go really quickly between, funding capital, funding service levels, funding staff positions. So there's not a ton of money to go around, and we want to make sure that we don't pull ourselves too thin.
And notice you have a combination of projects that are in the highest need neighborhoods and some that are not. Is that correct? It's shown in the red.
Yes, we have projects that are currently underway that are in high need areas as well as outside of high need areas.
Thank you very much. I think I understand better what we're talking about. Thank you.
Do we have, go ahead, Christy. I see
Oh,
you.
I was gonna say, we do have a motion on the floor. If commission members don't have a question about that motion, I would say vote on it. If you do, then I would take the questions.
Sorry, I do have one more question. And this relates back to Dr. Oputa's motion. Are we going to vote on these individually? There's 3 items in front of us. Are we taking each one individually, discussing and then moving on each one? Or are we going to package the 2 that are currently under consideration given Dr. Oputa's motion? I just want to be clear on the process.
That's up to the commission, however they want to approach those recommendations. So if you want to do it as separate motions, you can do that. Or if you want to package them all together, you can do that.
Okay. Chair, I'll leave it up to you. I think we have a motion on the floor, which I'm happy to vote on, but then I'll raise my motion after that, I guess.
Okay.
We're ready to vote.
All right. Commissioner, can you recall who did the first and the second? It was a lot of conversation. I'm
The
sorry.
motion was made by Commissioner Raputa, and the second was from Commissioner Cummings.
All right, can we conduct a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza,
Yes.
Commissioner Singh,
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Raputa,
Yes.
Commissioner Vang, Commissioner Vang? Are you still with us?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I am, it's just my mic wasn't working.
No
But
problem.
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Vice Chair Dolan
Yes.
and Chair McCoy.
Yes.
All right, that passes.
Okay, Vice Chair Dolan, you said you had a motion?
Yes, I move that we consider each one of the remaining two items separately and vote on them as individual items.
I'll second that, Commissioner Parks.
All right, do we have any questions in regards to the motion by Vice Chair Dolan? City Clerk, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Barraza, is that you? I can't see.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to have clarification. Are we talking about the themes or those other categories that we would take a vote on them? I wanted to make a comment real quick that I was actually out of commission. I got disconnected when the discussion of public safety was being discussed. You know, the welcoming areas. And we were told by staff that there will be a presentation on public safety at our next board meeting, commission meeting. And so I kind of felt that on that topic, I would feel more comfortable to wait and listen to staff. And I happen to agree that a welcoming and safe park is very important because many of our parks have the perception that they're not safe. So I just wanted to make that comment. So whatever way the commission wants to go, it's fine. But I just was hoping that we would have, it was suggested in the motion that we just approved, that the theme part would be discussed at our next meeting. That would be my preference.
And Commissioner Barraza, just to, that won't come back till March. That's not going to be the next meeting. I just want to clarify that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions in regards to the motion made by Vice Chair Dolan? City Clerk, can you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza,
No.
Commissioner Singh.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
It is to consider these items separately, individually.
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Raputa,
Yes.
Commissioner Vang,
Yes.
Chair Dolan, Vice Chair Dolan,
Yes.
and Chair McCoy.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 8-1.
All right, so the first one that we're taking a vote on is can you go back, please? So do I have hold on, let me make sure I get this right. Do I have a motion from a member of the commission regarding adoption of the FY23 Parks Department budget and capital improvement plans recommendation for City Council's consideration on the existing park prioritization?
I'm sorry, Chair, before we get to a motion, we go to the slide that shows the 5 highest scoring parks and then the 6, yes, thank you. This, and my purpose in asking for these to be voted on separately so that we have some discussion. As I understand it, we are going to recommend that funding go towards certain existing parks, and that some of these parks fall within our previously identified priority of funding those in the highest need neighborhoods, which are boxed in this orange box here in the lower left. I think Roding Regional should be taken out of that conversation for all sorts of reasons. And that leaves us with 5 parks that meet the criteria of being in the highest need neighborhood and also are weighted highly by the criteria set up through the master plan and the survey. So I just want to, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this diagram in front of us correctly, and B, just see if other commissioners see it the same way I do and agree that we could vote for some subset of what's in front of us in that way.
You interpreted the data correct, Commissioner Dolan, and if you want to see additional parks that are in high need areas that ranked high, you can pull up that other list so that you're not just stuck to 5 if you want to pull out Roding.
Well,
sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
I have a question. Good point, Vice Chair. Do we, by chance, have these parks and what district belongs to? So, for example, Vinland, I think that's what, 4. Do we have that? So it helps me to know the district they belong to.
Not on the slide in front of you, there's not a district. However, if you go to the map, we do have the district lines. They're a little harder to see.
Yeah. So Romaine, that's what, District 4? Frank Ball, District 3, I'm assuming, and Mary Ella Brown, is that District 3? And then Holmes, I don't know where Holmes is at. And then District Playground Park, Dickey. Is Dickey District 3 or is it?
I believe it's District 3. You're right, Commissioner Ping.
Thank you. And what about Holmes?
Give me one minute and I can.
Okay, thank you.
Holmes is in District 3.
Thank you.
I think you mentioned Romaine.
Yeah, Romaine and Mary Ella, just to confirm that I got that right.
Romaine's in District 7 and Mary Ella's in District 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Vane?
No, I'm done. I'm ready to vote. I think these are good parks in District 3, and I think there's one in District 7. But I believe these parks are on the community that needs most. I mean, in my opinion, that's what I stand. I think these are good parks. I'm sure a lot more parks out there too, but when you drive to District 3 compared to a lot of other districts, I mean, there's some district that it's also needed to in 1 and 7 and 7 and 4, but I think that investment in District 3 is needed. A lot of our African-American family reside in that area, and low-income families also. We have a big polar Hispanic family there too now. And I think investing in these highest need parks is important. And also to hear from the survey from our families who, came out and did a survey, to respect them too. So I'm ready to vote if we're ready to vote.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Chair McCoy, this is Commissioner Parks. A question about a potential way to formulate this motion. Would it be possible / reasonable to create a motion that first focused on the list that we're seeing on the slide here, and then next the top 20 on, so like kind of phasing the focus? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, because I apologize, but I'm like very project like focused. Like I just want to know what are the projects that we're talking about, right? And I understand that they're not identified yet. But as the budget is being developed, if these top priorities on the slide with the map, if we're unable to spend all of the money, can we then move on to the top 20 so that we're making sure that we are adding funds for Measure P like throughout the neighborhoods? Does that make sense? And maybe this isn't possible, but I'm just trying to figure out how to make sure that we're creating like some space for planning as the actual budget is coming together.
I'll refer to city staff for the answer.
So I don't see Christie's face on here, but
I'm here. Yeah, you can make a motion. You can make whatever motion you would like. So your motion could prioritize the top 5, highest needs neighborhoods parks as listed, and the top 5 non-highest needs neighborhoods parks, and then basically prioritize based off of the list, the other lists, for any, future funding considerations or excess funding considerations, however you want to kind of frame that or word it.
I'm curious to know if any of my fellow commissioners have thoughts about that, or if you all feel like you want to strictly prioritize the top 5 and then the top 5 in the highest needs neighborhood.
I would actually support that motion of going up to the top 20.
Yeah, I would support it too. Maybe if there's funds available. Yeah, me too, Commissioner Lee. Mm-hmm.
So Commissioner Parks, let me understand your motion. Your motion is to fund the first top 5 in the highest needs neighborhoods, and then if there's money left over, work off the top 20 of the list?
Yeah. You said it better than I did. Thank you, Chair McCoy.
Thank you. There was a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parks. Do we have a second for that motion?
Can I just ask I'm sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Again, can you go to that slide so that we're all clear what we're talking about? The one that lists the high need neighborhoods. I don't know who's running the slides.
Can we go back to the top 5 of the highest needs neighborhood?
Yes, thank you.
The top 5 that are not in the highest needs neighborhood, please?
That slide. So I just want to clarify. In my head, we're taking Roding out of this because Roding is a regional park with and we are saying that we want to prioritize Romaine, Frank H. Ball, Mary Ella Brown, Holmes, and Dickey Playground Park as our top priorities. And then if there are funds left over to fund, I'm sorry, Commissioner Parks, I think you said the top 20 remaining in the high need neighborhoods. Is that right?
So the way that I'm interpreting the information on this slide is that we would be recommending the top scoring parks, so Vinland, Einstein, Quigley, Logan, El Dorado, and prioritizing Romaine, Frank H. Ball, Mary Ella Brown, Holmes, and Dickey Playground Park. And then my suggestion is after city staff, identify the capital improvements and the maintenance improvements and how the Measure P funding might play out in those 10 parks, if there is still funding remaining, to then go to the list of the top 20, which is on the first slide. Thank you, Slide master, and identifying projects in those parks. And really this may not even be the right motion for what I'm hoping to accomplish. What I'm just wanting to make sure we don't do is leave out parks from the highest needs neighborhoods. And frankly, our entire park system needs park improvements, right, in existing parks. And we've talked about, additional staffing and kind of across the board park improvements relating to trash collection and those kinds of things. And I just want to make sure that we are allowing for that with this bucket. And so this motion is one way that I'm attempting to do that.
Well, okay, there's people with hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Commissioner Miller, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a little clarification on why would we be removing roading? Why remove the regional parks? It's in the case of roading, it certainly serves the same at-risk populations and larger numbers of people from the neighborhood than the other parks do. Why should it be excluded at this point?
I think that was Vice Chair Dolan's way of looking at it, not the whole commission, but I'll let Vice Chair Dolan speak for himself.
I guess, Commissioner Miller, it was just my impression that the regional parks, in the city's view, are well-funded otherwise and don't require that priority funding. But I could be wrong, and I'll maybe,
in my opinion, roading doesn't seem to fit into that category because it's got some severe ongoing generationally bad needs in my opinion. But so I would urge that we leave it in the on the list.
Aaron, is there any
I would support that we leave it in.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify because I may have misunderstood all along what the city's position was on the regional parks in terms of their funding and where they fit into the master plan, et cetera. If roading is a highest need neighborhood, which it is the park a highest need park from the city's perspective?
Yes, that's the way that you interpret the highest need data.
Okay. Then I withdraw my objection to funding Roading Park.
And maybe just to clarify, Commissioner Parks, I see where you're headed with this and understand it gives staff and the administration and council more flexibility, right, to utilize maybe a longer list. The list that shows like the 5 parks and then the 6 parks, that information is directly from this list. So it may be simpler to just recommend a list of 20 since the list of 20 includes the parks on the other slide. It's just pulling them out in a manner so you can see them, but essentially all the parks on the other slide are on this list as well.
Are all of the parks listed in the highest needs neighborhood section listed on the 20 slide?
Scroll down, Peter. No, so there are additional parks beyond 20 that are in high need areas.
5, 6. Okay, thank you for that clarification. That is very helpful. I would then edit my motion to suggest the top 20, like prioritizing the top 20.
I do have a question on your top 20, because when I'm looking at this park prioritization, it's a little bit confusing. It's because they also have highest need and it also has the park prioritization. So which top 20 will we consider? Just, I don't know the top 20. If we can clarify that. And then when we vote for the park prioritization, are we looking at the top score parks, which is Linden, Einstein, Quickly, Woken, and Alvarado, and then also the highest needs park? So we consider all, and the regional park, Romaine, Frank, and Mary Ella, Ember Homes. Is that what we're looking at, or are we just looking at highest need? I just want to clarify that too, because that's a little bit confusing for me.
Commissioner Parks, did you want to clarify in terms of your motion, her question?
Yes. So I guess going back to the original motion, I guess what I was thinking is that the very first priorities would be the highest ranked parks based on the weighting measures that we adopted, and also the top ranked parks that are also in the highest needs neighborhoods, because we know that at least 50% of the funding has to be expended on those. And then with your clarification, Aldi, because all of the parks listed on the slide with the map are also on the list of the top 20, I thought perhaps it might be more simple to move to accept that list of the top 20. And address, I guess I could add to address them in order of their score.
Are we talking about the list that we have on the screen right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Vang, do you have another question? You still have your hand up.
Sorry, that was my legacy hand.
It's okay. So Commissioner Parks, you're changing your motion to be the top 20 instead of the top 5 and the highest needs, and the top 5 and not the highest needs?
Let me try to restate it again. So my motion is to recommend this list of the top 20 ranked parks, given the prioritization data that we went through before, and focusing first on the highest score of the highest needs neighborhoods and the highest scored highest needs neighborhoods.
Do I have a second?
So can I clarify one thing? So are you saying that the highest need neighborhoods would get would they get priority over the top 20 first, and then the rest of the 20 would come into play based off their scoring?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll second.
All right, can we conduct a roll call vote?
Certainly. Commissioner?
I have a question, sort of comment before that, because that I appreciate Commissioner Singh's question, because that was not clear to me in the motion. That we are saying prioritize the 6 highest needs, then second the other 5, and then the rest of the 20. Is that what the motion is?
Let me apologize for my lack of clarity in trying to formulate this. So let me try one more time. So my motion is to recommend to council first the highest needs neighborhood, highest ranked parks. Second, the highest ranked parks that do not meet the highest needs neighborhood criteria. And third, the remaining parks on the list of 20 on the first slide that we're looking at here. So first, highest needs neighborhood, highest rank. Second, highest rank, not highest needs neighborhoods. And then third, any remaining parks on the list of 20.
I will second that motion.
Okay,
That last
so-
one, as my therapist always says, I think we made some real progress.
Thank you for
Can
your
we go
patience,
back?
everyone.
Can we go back? I just want to be clear. Can we go back to where we have the top 5 of the highest needs, that one slide? So Commissioner Parks, I'm going to try this one more time. Your motion is to recommend doing the top scoring parks in the highest need neighborhoods, then the top scoring parks, and then work our way if there's additional money off the top 20.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And
Now
I'm
can we,
seconding that motion.
so,
And I believe Commissioner Singh was the original second, and I think we first
Oh,
we
okay.
see if he would agree with the updated motion.
I agree.
All right, so the first is Commissioner Parks, second is Commissioner Singh.
and can we please conduct a roll call vote?
Happy to do so. Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza,
Yes.
Commissioner Singh,
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Apuda,
Yes, 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 yes.
Commissioner Vang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dolan,
Yes.
and Chair McCoy.
Yes.
All right, 9-0.
Now, I believe we have one more vote, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So for discussion, before we get to any vote, can we go back to the slide that overlays all the information that has the parks and the pipeline? That's the one. So I would put forward for discussion a motion that says we approve the parks in the pipeline as our priorities for new parks, investment in new parks. I'm just saying that because they seem to overlap, or at least are adjacent to our highest priority areas. And I put that out, I'm sorry, I put that out there just to start discussion because obviously we went through a process before, and I'm happy to do that again.
Do we have any discussion around Vice Chair Dolan's motion?
I would second it. This is Scott Miller.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Madam Chair, if I could just to get a clarification.
Yes.
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 factors that are going to be taken into consideration in selecting priority areas and sites for new parks. What can we, since this methodology has been approved by the commission, and I kind of happen to like this map that we are showing on the screen, why can we approve this map and the factors that have already been approved by the commission and include that in the motion?
Would you like to make that as a motion, Commissioner Barraza?
Yes, I would.
I'm sorry, can I ask, I'm sorry, Commissioner Barraza, I'm not sure I understand exactly what our vote would be on then, to prioritize what? I'm sorry.
It's really hard to hear you, Commissioner Baza. I can't hear you on my side. I'm not sure if other commission can hear you.
I think what Commissioner Barraza was saying is that the 5 factors that we selected to be determined for new priority areas and sites for new parks.
The factors that are listed there, those 5 factors, and which are, I believe they are shown on the map, that those answer identifying specific projects. We're not. We would just identify the methodology for.
So in other words, Commissioner Barraza, you would like to keep the map the way it is and send that recommendation to council?
And I actually like the suggestion that was made by Commissioner Dolan that those areas, I don't know how we would incorporate that, but the areas that are close to the highest need areas should have greater priority. That would be fine with me to add that clarification to the motion.
Is that your motion on the floor? Or your suggestion?
No, it's a motion. If there's
This is the city clerk. I do believe we have a motion on the floor that we need to deal with first. I can recommend that maybe Commissioner Barraza offer that as a friendly amendment to the motion made by Vice Chair Dolan.
Yes, I would, if that's possible.
I will amend my motion as offered by my friend Commissioner Barraza.
I will second that motion.
And yeah, I do believe Commissioner Miller had made the second and would need to agree.
Okay, my bad. Commissioner Miller, do you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we conduct a roll call vote, please? If there's no other questions from any other commissioners.
Chair McCoy, a very, very quick question. What I'm afraid, well, first a comment. What I'm afraid we're losing in this motion is the highest needs neighborhoods. I'm not sure how that's identified. Actually, let me back up. Could we just have the motion restated? That would help me with the amendment.
And yes, and actually the amendment was a bit muffled as it came through. And so if either Vice Chair Dolan or Commissioner Barraza could restate that, would be appreciated.
I was afraid of this.
Yeah, let me, if I could take the shot at, and then you could add or clarify.
Go ahead.
Priority areas and sites for new parks be selected using the criteria that the commission has approved that identifies those 5 areas that are shown on the screen there, and which includes gap analysis, community priority, emerging community priorities, other plans, and pipeline parks. And I think there was a side comment that priority should continue to be assigned to those projects that are located within the highest, what do we call them, highest need areas, or close to them, or adjacent to, or something to that effect.
And just a clarification, Commissioner Barraza, the highest needs area or adjacent to, you're referring to that top 33% as adopted by council?
Correct.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right, do we have any other questions from the commissioners regarding the motion that's on the floor? If none, can we conduct a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Barraza?
Yes.
Commissioner Singh?
Yes.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Oputa?
Yes.
Commissioner Vang?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dolan?
Yes.
And Chair McCoy?
Yes.
9-0.
This item is approved, and we will now join the meeting at 8:18. Good job, commissioners. You have some time to tuck your kids into bed, and I will see you at our next meeting. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good job, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.